How often do you find yourself pulled in a dozen directions at once, scrolling endlessly, overwhelmed by notifications, or mentally replaying conversations long after they're over? In a world that never stops demanding your attention, it's easy to feel like your mind is a ship caught in a storm, no anchor, no steady course. But what if the antidote to this modern chaos was written nearly 2,000 years ago? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once observed, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That simple yet profound truth is the heart of Stoicism, a philosophy that doesn't just diagnose our distractions, but offers a timeless toolkit to reclaim focus, purpose, and peace. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or gritting your teeth through life's challenges. It's about cultivating a mindset that turns obstacles into opportunities, distractions into moments of clarity. And the best part, these aren't abstract ideas locked away in ancient texts. They're practical, sustainable practices you can weave into your daily routine starting today. Imagine ending your day feeling centered, no matter what chaos unfolded. Picture waking up with intention, steering your thoughts instead of being dragged by them. That's the promise of Stoicism, and it's far more accessible than you might think. In this video, we'll explore 24 Stoic practices designed to strengthen your mindfulness like daily mental weightlifting. From morning rituals that set the tone for your day to subtle shifts in perspective that dissolve stress, these aren't just theories, they're tools tested by time. Whether you're new to Stoicism or looking to deepen your practice, each insight here is chosen for its real-world impact, because mindfulness shouldn't feel like another item on your to-do list. It should feel like slipping into a calmer, clearer version of yourself, one thought, one breath, one intentional moment at a time. Ready to begin? Let's step into this journey together. How often do you barrel into your day like a train leaving the station full speed ahead, but with no real destination in mind? That frantic energy might feel productive, but Seneca warned it's the fastest way to lose sight of what truly matters. The Stoics didn't just stumble out of bed. They designed their mornings like architects, laying a foundation of intention before the world could demand their attention. Picture Seneca himself lighting an oil lamp in the quiet pre-dawn darkness, taking time to ask himself one powerful question: what would make today not just good but meaningful? This practice wasn't about crafting elaborate to-do lists. It was a mental rehearsal, a chance to anticipate challenges and choose his responses in advance. Imagine facing a difficult coworker or a delayed project. By envisioning these moments calmly first thing in the morning, he turned potential frustrations into opportunities to practice patience or creativity. Contrast that with how most of us start our days scrolling through notifications, reacting to whatever demands pop up first, letting outside chaos dictate our inner state. The difference isn't just productivity, it's sovereignty over your own mind. Here's how to make this ancient ritual work for you. Before you reach for your phone or dive into tasks, steal just 5 minutes of stillness. Ask yourself 2 Stoic questions. What's within my control today? And what virtue could anchor me? Maybe it's patience during a long meeting or courage to have an awkward conversation. Then visualize yourself handling those moments with calm clarity. This isn't about predicting every detail. It's about preparing your mindset so when chaos inevitably comes, you meet it like a Stoic, not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone who's already chosen how to respond. Try this tomorrow. Pick one intention, not a task, but a quality you want to embody. Maybe it's gratitude during your commute or focus during deep work. Then, like Seneca, watch how that small morning investment pays dividends all day long. Because when you start with intention, you don't just have a better day, you become someone who can handle any day. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship centuries ago, watching sailors carefully inspect every rope and plank before setting sail. They weren't being pessimistic. They were practicing what the Stoics called Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. By visualizing storms, broken masts, or missed ports, they weren't inviting disaster, they were stripping fear of its power. The Roman philosopher Seneca took this further, advising his friends to periodically lose everything in their minds, to mentally rehearse losing their wealth, status, even loved ones. Why not to dwell on sorrow, but to discover a profound truth? That joy isn't found in clinging to what we have, but in recognizing how little we truly need to be at peace. Epictetus, born a slave, framed it bluntly. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. When we refuse to acknowledge life's fragility, we set ourselves up for shock when change comes. But when we've already walked through those scenarios in our minds, we're no longer hostages to circumstance. Think of it like a fire drill. The alarm isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to make the real thing less terrifying because you've practiced your response. Here's how this ancient tool translates to modern life. Before a big presentation, instead of just hoping it goes well, take 2 minutes to visualize everything that could go wrong. The projector fails, your voice shakes, the audience seems bored. Then mentally rehearse staying calm, adapting, even finding humor in the chaos. This isn't negative thinking, it's preparation. It's why athletes visualize missed shots before games, or why astronauts train for equipment failures. By confronting adversity in your imagination first, you build an emotional resilience that actual challenges can't shake. Try this tonight. Pick one thing you often worry about: a difficult conversation, a financial setback, a professional rejection. Close your eyes and vividly imagine it happening. But here's the Stoic twist: don't stop at the problem. Visualize yourself responding with dignity, resourcefulness, even gratitude for the lesson. That's the alchemy of negative visualization. It turns fear into fuel, not by avoiding the dark, but by learning to see in it. Because when you've already faced the worst in your mind, the real world loses its power to surprise you. Most stress comes from a simple but costly misunderstanding: the belief that we can control far more than we actually can. The Stoics sliced through this illusion with surgical precision, dividing every situation into 2 clear categories: what's within our power and what isn't. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not the events that unfold around you. That's the essence of the Dichotomy of Control, a practice that doesn't just reduce anxiety, it rewires how you engage with the world. Think about the last time you white-knuckled your steering wheel in traffic, cursing the slow driver ahead. The Stoics would ask, can you control that driver? The red light, the delay itself, no. But here's what you can control: your breath, your focus, even the podcast or music you choose to fill the time. The frustration comes from pouring energy into the uncontrollable while neglecting the very things that could restore your peace. This isn't passive resignation, it's strategic focus. When you stop fighting invisible battles, you free up energy to change what's actually yours to command. Let's make this practical. Grab a pen and paper, or open your Notes app and list 3 things currently weighing on you. Maybe it's a relative's health, a boss's opinion, or even tomorrow's weather. Now, cross out everything that falls outside your direct influence. What remains? Perhaps your ability to research treatment options, to prepare thoroughly for that meeting, or to pack an umbrella. That shortlist is where your power lies. The rest, that's the practice of letting go, not because those things don't matter, but because clinging to them only drains you. This shift isn't about lowering your standards, it's about raising your awareness. The athlete can't control the referee's call, but they can master their training routine. The artist can't force people to love their work, but they can hone their craft with relentless passion. Every moment, you're choosing where to invest your attention in the storm or in steering your ship. And when you consistently align with what's yours to shape, something remarkable happens. Life stops feeling like a series of emergencies and starts feeling like a series of opportunities. What if the most powerful tool for self-mastery wasn't an app or a guru's advice, but a blank page waiting for your honest words? Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be published. Those profound insights were scribbled by candlelight, a private dialogue between a man and his own soul. That's the heart of Stoic journaling, not recording events but dissecting them. Seneca put it beautifully: "When the lamp is out and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure my words and actions." Imagine treating your mind like a garden and your journal as the tool to uproot weeds of irrationality and plant seeds of wisdom. The Stoics didn't journal to vent or dwell. They wrote to interrogate their experiences. Was that anger justified? Did fear dictate that decision? This practice turns the page into a courtroom where your emotions stand trial, with reason as the judge. Think of it like mental archaeology, digging beneath surface reactions to uncover the beliefs driving them. When you angrily jot, "My coworker undermined me," the Stoic follow-up question is, did they truly rob me of my worth, or did I hand them that power by tying my confidence to their opinion? Modern journaling often falls into two traps: sterile bullet points that skip self-reflection, or rambling streams that reinforce negativity without resolution. The Stoic alternative: structured curiosity. Try this tonight. Set a timer for 5 minutes and answer 3 questions. What tested me today? How did I respond? What would virtue have looked like in that moment? No guilt, no grand resolutions, just observation. Maybe you snapped at a barrister when running late. Instead of self-flagellation, ask, was haste more valuable than kindness in that moment? The goal isn't to judge yesterday, but to sculpt tomorrow. Your journal becomes a mirror when you write not just what happened, but what you learned from what happened. That's why Marcus revisited his notes nightly, not to wallow, but to witness his own growth. Tonight, before sleep, open a notebook and have that conversation. The ink will reveal what the chaos of the day obscured: patterns, progress, and the quiet truth that you're always one reflection away from a wiser version of yourself. There's a reason great thinkers from Aristotle to Nietzsche swore by their daily walks. Movement doesn't just carry the body forward, it propels the mind into clarity. The Stoics didn't see walking as mere exercise. They treated it as mobile meditation, a chance to sync their rhythm with nature's unhurried pace. Epictetus, who taught philosophy under open skies, urged his students to walk as if every step kisses the earth, fully present to the rustle of leaves, the play of shadows, the scent of damp soil. In a world where we now scroll while we stroll, this practice is revolutionary, walking not to get somewhere, but to remember where you already are. Modern research calls it walking meditation, but the Stoics were centuries ahead. They knew that placing one foot deliberately in front of the other could anchor a scattered mind. Think of Seneca pacing the colonnades of his villa, untangling complex thoughts with each lap, or Marcus Aurelius writing about finding solace in the murmur of a brook, the bending of a branch. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were exercises in attention. Today, we've diluted walking into multitasking, checking emails on treadmills, listening to podcasts on errands. But what if you reclaimed those minutes as a sanctuary for presence? Here's how to transform your next walk into Stoic practice. Leave your phone behind, or at least silenced. As you move, engage each sense like a scientist collecting data. Notice 5 details you'd normally overlook: the texture of bark under your fingertips, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the way light filters through leaves in dappled patterns. When your mind inevitably wanders to tomorrow's meeting or yesterday's argument, gently guide it back to the physical world. This isn't about emptying your thoughts. It's about observing them without letting them hijack the moment. Silicon Valley executives swear by walking meetings for breakthroughs, but the Stoics would argue the real innovation isn't pacing while brainstorming, it's pacing while unthinking. Try this challenge. For the next 7 days, take a 10-minute walk with no agenda beyond awareness. No music, no calls, no productivity targets. Just you, the ground beneath your feet, and the invitation to witness the world as if seeing it for the first time. Because when you walk with intention, every path becomes a pilgrimage, not to a place but to a state of mind. What if comfort, that warm blanket we constantly reach for, is quietly sabotaging your resilience? The Stoics didn't just tolerate discomfort, they invited it, not out of masochism but as a form of mental vaccination. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it bluntly: how can anyone become courageous if they only seek what feels safe? This philosophy isn't about suffering for suffering's sake. It's about rewiring your relationship with adversity by choosing it on your own terms. Think of it like lifting weights for your mind. You wouldn't expect to bench press 200 pounds without training, yet we often expect to handle life's heavy moments without any preparation. Consider the modern paradox. We live in an age of unprecedented convenience. Meals delivered in minutes, temperature-controlled homes, endless entertainment at our fingertips, yet anxiety and fragility are soaring. The Stoics would argue it's no coincidence. When we eliminate all friction from our lives, we become like plants grown in sterile labs, fragile when exposed to real-world storms. That's why figures like Marcus Aurelius deliberately slept on thin mats in winter, or why Seneca periodically wore rough clothing, not because they lacked resources, but because they understood comfort creates dependency. They were practicing voluntary discomfort, a technique that transforms hardship from a threat into a training ground. Here's how to apply this today without turning your life into an ascetic experiment. Start small, skip the snooze button just once this week and step straight into a cold shower. Notice the instinct to retreat, then consciously override it. Or try walking a mile without your phone, letting boredom, that modern-day villain, rise and pass like a wave. Even skipping a single meal can recalibrate your relationship with abundance, replacing entitlement with gratitude. These aren't punishments, they're rehearsals for life's inevitable disruptions. When your flight gets cancelled or your Wi-Fi fails, you won't panic. You'll already know you can thrive with less. The magic lies in the choice. There's no resilience in forced hardship, only trauma. But when you voluntarily step into discomfort, you reclaim agency. Like a firefighter training in controlled burns, you're not waiting for disaster to teach you courage. You're building it proactively. So today, pick one tiny hardship. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Drink your coffee black, or leave your jacket at home on a brisk morning. Each time you do, you're whispering to your deepest self, I am not ruled by comfort. I am stronger than my cravings. And with every small victory, you're not just enduring life's storms, you're learning to dance in the rain. Ever feel like your problems loom so large they blot out everything else? The Stoics had an antidote for this, a mental exercise called the view from above, and it's more powerful than you might think. Picture this: you're floating above Earth, watching continents shrink to patches of green and blue, cities dissolve into tiny grids and oceans stretch like silent, shimmering sheets. From this vantage point, your deadlines, disagreements, and daily stresses seem almost impossibly small. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "Think of the totality of all things and how insignificant they become when held against the vastness of time and space." This wasn't about dismissing your struggles, it was about contextualizing them. Consider how differently you'd approach a workplace conflict if you imagined observing it from orbit. That colleague who took credit for your idea, from up here, they're just another speck in the mosaic of humanity, driven by the same fears and insecurities as anyone else. The project that feels life or death, it's one ripple in an ocean of human endeavor. This perspective doesn't erase challenges, it elevates your response to them. The Stoics called it cosmic consciousness, the realization that your life is both infinitesimal and infinitely connected to something grander. Here's how to make this tangible today. Take a current worry, a financial strain, a strained friendship, and project yourself 10 years into the future. Look back at this moment. How much will it truly matter then? Not in a dismissive way, but with clarity. Will this shape who you become, or is it just a passing cloud? The goal isn't to minimize your feelings, but to distinguish between what's urgent and what's enduring. Try it now. Close your eyes and zoom out mentally. See your street from a drone's height, then your city from a plane, then the planet from the moon. Notice how borders blur, noise fades, and what remains is the quiet truth that most of what consumes us daily is temporary. Then, like Marcus, ask, in the face of eternity, does this deserve my anguish? The answer might surprise you, because when you stand at the edge of the cosmos, even the heaviest burdens feel lighter, not because they've changed, but because you have. Stoics weren't pessimists, they were prepared. While modern self-help often urges us to visualize success, the Stoics practiced something far more counterintuitive. They mentally rehearsed failure. Seneca wrote letters advising his friends to regularly lose everything in their minds, not to dwell on misery, but to disarm it. This is Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. And it's not about expecting the worst, it's about immunizing yourself against surprise. Imagine two travelers. One obsessively checks the weather app, hoping their flight won't be delayed. The other packs a book, snacks, and a charged battery pack, already picturing how they'll use the unexpected time to reflect or catch up on reading. Who do you think boards the plane with less anxiety? Worry drains your energy by trapping you in what-if loops without solutions. Premeditatio Malorum flips the script. It's a strategic rehearsal where you confront challenges on your terms. Take public speaking, a near-universal fear. Most people either avoid it entirely or white-knuckle through with shaky hands. But someone practicing this Stoic tool would sit quietly beforehand, visualizing the microphone cutting out, the audience looking bored, even their own voice cracking. Then, and this is crucial, they'd mentally walk through their response, pausing to reset the mic, telling a relatable story to re-engage listeners, or laughing off the stumble. By pre-writing the script, they rob the fear of its power. Seneca compared this to sailors inspecting their ships before storms. The wise man considers both what may happen and how he'll bear it. Notice the dual focus. The event itself is secondary to your capacity to handle it. Modern psychology backs this up. Studies show that emergency responders who mentally rehearse crises make fewer panic-driven mistakes. The key difference between this and catastrophizing control. Worry says, "This will destroy me." Premeditatio Malorum says, "If this happens, here's how I'll rise to it." Try this tonight with a stressor you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a tough conversation with your partner or a high-stakes work presentation. Close your eyes and vividly imagine everything going wrong, voices rising, objections flying, even total silence. Now script your Stoic response, slowing your breath, reframing their words with curiosity, or finding humor in the tension. The goal isn't to predict every twist, it's to prove to yourself that you're never powerless. Because when you've already stood firm in your mind, reality's winds can't knock you down. Gratitude often gets reduced to a fleeting feeling, a quick thanks muttered over good news, or a warm flicker during holiday meals. The Stoics saw it differently, not as passive luck but as active training. Epictetus, who lived with just a clay cup and a rough cloak, put it bluntly, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things he has not, but rejoices for those he has." Notice the verb rejoices, not feels. This isn't about waiting for gratitude to strike. It's about deliberately stoking it like a fire in winter. Consider the Roman Stoics' ritual of frugal meals, not just eating simply, but pausing to vividly imagine losing even that basic sustenance. Musonius Rufus would have his students dine on plain bread, then ask, "Would this not taste sweet if you were starving?" This wasn't deprivation theater, it was sensory recalibration. By temporarily removing comforts, they exposed the mind's remarkable ability to normalize abundance. We experience this every vacation. The first sip of coffee with an ocean view feels miraculous, but by day 3, we're complaining about Wi-Fi speed. The Stoic twist, they refuse to let that normalization rob them of wonder. Modern gratitude journals often fall into the 3 good things trap, listing surface-level wins without digging into why they matter. The Stoic method goes deeper. Try this tonight before sleep. Write down one ordinary thing you relied on today: your functioning lungs, the clean water from your tap, the barista who remembered your order. Now imagine it's gone. Really sit in that absence, the thirst, the struggle to breathe, the isolation of being unseen. Then return to reality. That visceral contrast is where gratitude transforms from polite acknowledgement to electric awareness. This practice isn't about ignoring life's hardships, it's about balancing the scales. Our brains naturally fixate on threats, an evolutionary relic that leaves us drowning in cortisol while blessings float by unnoticed. Systematic gratitude is the corrective lens. Seneca wrote letters describing his walks through public baths not to scorn their luxury, but to celebrate his capacity to enjoy them without needing them. That's the golden pivot, not clinging to comforts but recognizing each as a temporary gift. So tonight, when you flip that light switch or feel your pillow's cool side, pause. Don't just count your blessings, weigh them, because the more you practice seeing abundance, the less scarcity controls you. Reacting is easy, responding is stoic. There's a razor-thin but life-changing difference between the two. One happens to you, the other happens through you. Marcus Aurelius described this gap as the guardian of the mind, a mental sentry that stands between raw impulse and deliberate action. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. That pause, that breath, that heartbeat of hesitation, it's where your freedom lies." Because while you can't control the driver who cuts you off or the colleague who dismisses your idea, you can control what happens next: the clenched fist or the deep breath, the sharp retort or the measured question. Think of your mind as a castle. Reactions are the drawbridge slamming down at the first sign of trouble, letting every invader, anger, defensiveness, haste charge straight in. A stoic response, that's the gatekeeper who assesses the threat, lowers the bridge only when prudent, and decides whether to engage at all. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. The amygdala, our emotional alarm system, fires in milliseconds, but the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, takes a full 10 seconds to fully kick in. Those 10 seconds are your stoic pause, your built-in buffer against regret. Here's how to train this muscle today. Next time you receive an email that makes your pulse spike, place your hands flat on the desk and count slowly to 5. In that space, ask Marcus's question, will this matter in a month? Or try this mid-conversation. When someone says something inflammatory, literally bite your tongue just for one breath and notice the shift. The heat of the moment doesn't disappear, but suddenly you're no longer drowning in it, you're observing it from the shore. The magic isn't in suppressing emotion, it's in surfing it. Picture a martial artist using an opponent's momentum to redirect their force. That's the Stoic pause in action, transforming raw energy into precision. So pick one interaction today, a text thread, a family dinner, even a customer service call, and practice being the gatekeeper instead of the gate. Because every time you widen that space between trigger and action, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're sculpting a self that no external chaos can shake. Death isn't morbid, it's the most honest teacher you'll ever have. The Stoics didn't shy away from this truth. They placed reminders of mortality at the center of their philosophy, calling it Memento Mori, remember you must die. Roman generals had servants whisper this phrase in their ears during victory parades. Philosophers kept skulls on their desks not as grim decor, but as grounding tools. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we've come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." This wasn't about fear, it was about focus. When you hold the finite nature of time in your hands like an hourglass, every grain of sand suddenly matters. Consider how differently we'd live if we truly internalized that this conversation, this meal, this ordinary Tuesday might be our last. Not in a paralyzing way, but with piercing clarity. That petty argument, the grudges we nurse, the dreams we keep saving for later, they either shrink to irrelevance or surge to urgency under death's light. The Stoics used this practice like a mental scalpel, cutting away trivialities to reveal what's vital. Picture two versions of yourself, one drifting through days on autopilot, too busy answering emails to call their aging parent. The other, who's just received a terminal diagnosis, suddenly realizing which connections and projects truly deserve their remaining hours. Memento Mori asks, why wait for the diagnosis to start living like that? Here's how to make this practice transformative rather than terrifying. Each morning, place one small object in your pocket, a coin, a smooth stone, and let it serve as your Memento Mori. Every time you touch it, ask, if this were my last year, would I spend this moment this way? Not to provoke anxiety, but to align your actions with your deepest values. That meeting you're dreading, death's perspective might reveal it as unimportant or show you how to make it meaningful, the hobby you've been meaning to try. Mortality doesn't accept someday as currency. Try this tonight. Write 2 sentences. First, at my funeral, I hope people say. Second, to make that true, today I willed. The gap between those lines is where Memento Mori works its alchemy, not by adding more to your life, but by stripping away everything that isn't alive. Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you start making today count. Not with grand gestures, but with the quiet courage to live as if your time, because it is precious. What if every obstacle, every disappointment, every twist of fate that felt like a setback was actually an invitation to grow stronger? Nietzsche, centuries after the Stoics, called it Amor Fati, the love of fate, but the heart of this practice beats in Epictetus's words. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens. Then you'll be happy. This isn't passive surrender, it's active collaboration with reality. Picture Epictetus himself, born a slave, lame from childhood beatings, later exiled. Yet he transformed each blow into a stepping stone, calling his hardships assignments from the universe. His school in exile became the cradle of Stoic wisdom precisely because he chose to see his chains not as limitations, but as raw material for mastery. Modern psychology calls this cognitive reframing, but the Stoics understood it as something deeper, not just tolerating what life hands you, but embracing it like a sculptor embraces marble, knowing that even the roughest block contains a masterpiece. Think of a cancelled flight. The average person fumes at the delay. The practitioner of Amor Fati spots the unexpected hours as a gift time to finally read that novel, call an old friend, or watch the sunset from an unfamiliar city. The event itself hasn't changed, the relationship to the event has. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one minor annoyance, a traffic jam, a rainy picnic, a missed delivery. Instead of resisting it, ask, what hidden advantage does this contain? Maybe the traffic lets you listen to an inspiring podcast uninterrupted. The rainy picnic becomes a cozy indoor feast with board games, the delayed package. A chance to practice patience, a virtue you've been meaning to cultivate. The goal isn't to pretend you enjoy frustration, but to mine it for meaning. Try this reframe. When life hands you an assignment you didn't choose, a job loss, a health scare, even a broken appliance, whisper Epictetus's mantra, "This is what I've been trained for." Because Amor Fati isn't about loving pain, it's about trusting your ability to alchemize pain into power. And when you stop fighting reality, you start dancing with it, turning every stumble into part of the rhythm. Your thoughts are guests, not owners. That's how the Stoics saw the constant stream of judgments flooding our minds, not as truth, but as visitors knocking at the door, waiting to be evaluated before we let them in. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it bluntly, it's not things that disturb us, but our interpretations of them. This is the discipline of assent, a practice that doesn't ask you to stop thinking, but to stop believing every thought without question. Imagine your mind as a courtroom where first impressions stand trial, and you're the judge demanding evidence before issuing a verdict. Consider how quickly we spin stories from scraps of information. A friend reads your message but doesn't reply immediately. Before you know it, you've constructed an entire narrative. They're upset with me. I must have said something wrong. The Stoics would call this giving assent to an untested impression, signing off on a mental contract without reading the fine print. Here's the twist. That delay could mean anything: a dead phone battery, a busy workday, or even your friend pausing to craft a thoughtful response. The discipline of assent isn't about assuming the best. It's about suspending judgment until you have facts. Epictetus used a vivid analogy. When someone hands you a coin, you inspect it before pocketing it. Do the same with the thoughts handed to your mind. This scrutiny changes everything. That driver who cut you off, your initial impression might label them reckless or rude. But apply Stoic scrutiny. Could they be rushing to a hospital? Maybe they didn't see me. Even if they were being careless, does your anger improve the situation, or just your blood pressure? The goal isn't to excuse bad behavior, but to free yourself from unnecessary distress by recognizing that your interpretation, not the event itself, creates your suffering. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one automatic judgment you've made recently. Maybe a coworker's brief email felt cold, or a family member's sigh seemed critical. Now play detective. What evidence supports that interpretation? What alternative explanations exist? You're not aiming for Pollyanna positivity. You're training your mind to spot the gap between what happens and the story you tell about it. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone to reveal the form within, each question removes distortions, leaving only what's real. try this experiment. For the next hour, treat every negative thought as a hypothesis, not a fact. When your mind whispers this is unbearable, ask, is it truly unbearable or just uncomfortable? When you assume they disrespected me, challenge, could I be misreading their intention? This isn't self-doubt, it's mental hygiene. Because when you stop conflating impressions with reality, you reclaim something precious, the freedom to choose your response rather than being hijacked by assumptions. And that's where true power resides, not in controlling the world, but in mastering how you see it. If mornings are for setting intentions, evenings are for uncovering truths, the kind that only reveal themselves in hindsight. Seneca, the Stoic sage who tutored emperors, ended each day with 3 piercing questions. What wrong did I correct today? What weakness did I resist? What virtue did I strengthen? Notice what's missing: productivity metrics, completed tasks, or external achievements. This wasn't a performance review, it was a character audit. Picture a CEO reviewing spreadsheets versus an artist studying their sketches for hidden patterns. The evening review is the latter, searching for the subtle brushstrokes of growth that daylight obscures. Modern wind-down rituals often revolve around escapism, scrolling through social media, binge-watching shows, anything to numb the day's residue, the Stoic alternative. Turning those final waking moments into a forge where raw experiences are hammered into wisdom. Take the executive who spends 10 minutes journaling not about quarterly profits, but about moments they succumbed to impatience in a meeting or resisted the urge to interrupt. Or the parent who reflects not on how many chores they crossed off, but on whether their tone with their child carried respect or frustration. The magic lies in specificity. I snapped at the barista when she got my order wrong, holds more power than I was impatient today. One's a vague confession, the other's a roadmap for tomorrow. Here's how to make this ancient practice work in a world of notifications and never off switches. Set a phone reminder 30 minutes before bed, not with a generic journal prompt, but with Seneca's exact triad: corrected, resisted, strengthened. Keep it brief. This isn't a diary entry, it's a distillation. Maybe today's lesson was realizing your anxiety spiked when you skipped lunch, revealing how physical hunger masquerades as emotional stress. Or perhaps you noticed how pausing for 3 breaths before replying to a critical email transformed the entire conversation. The key is to spotlight just one insight, not to overwhelm but to illuminate. Try tonight's review with this twist. Instead of focusing solely on your actions, include your assumptions. Did you take someone's terseness personally when it was just their exhaustion speaking? Did you assume a task would be unbearable that turned out manageable? These mental missteps are gold. They reveal where your judgments stray from reality. Because when you end the day not just recounting events, but examining how you interpreted them, you're no longer just living life, you're decoding it. And with each night's decoding, you wake up a little wiser than the person who went to bed. Virtue isn't archaic, it's your compass. The Stoics didn't see virtues as abstract ideals gathering dust in philosophy books. They treated them as daily tools sharpened by use. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. 4 core virtues anchored their philosophy: wisdom to discern what's right, courage to act on it, justice to guide how you treat others, and temperance to keep desires in check. These weren't lofty goals, they were lenses for every decision, from how you greet a stranger to how you handle betrayal. Picture this: you're reviewing a contract and spot an error that would cost your client thousands if unnoticed. Pointing it out means delaying the deal and your commission. The easy lie whispers, virtue speaks louder. This is where Stoicism moves from theory to practice. Choosing honesty here isn't about morality lectures. It's about aligning action with identity. As Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Every time you act contrary to your values, you sand down your own integrity like a knife dulled by misuse. But each virtuous choice, no matter how small, forges a self you can respect. The magic lies in specificity. Be courageous feels overwhelming until you break it down. Courage today might mean voicing an unpopular opinion in a meeting, or resisting the urge to check your phone during a difficult conversation. Justice could look like giving honest feedback to a struggling colleague rather than avoiding discomfort. Temperance, it's choosing one more rep at the gym when your mind begs to quit, or walking past the third drink when social pressure says otherwise. Virtues thrive in the granular, so here's your challenge. Name your guiding virtue for the week, not a vague aspiration, but one concrete principle to test in daily moments. Maybe it's patience, not as a blanket ideal, but as a commitment to listen fully before interrupting your partner tonight. Or wisdom distilled into pausing to ask, is this reaction helpful? Before firing off that email, the Stoics didn't measure virtue by grand gestures, but by the sum of small, consistent choices. Because when you know what you stand for, every decision becomes a chance to stand taller. Ryan Holiday didn't just write a book called The Obstacle is the Way, he lived it. When his first business venture collapsed, he could have wallowed in frustration. Instead, he turned to Marcus Aurelius's words, "The fire that forges steel is the same that melts wax." That's the essence of this Stoic practice, not avoiding obstacles, but recognizing them as the very material that shapes resilience. Every setback you face, whether it's a failed project, a strained relationship, or a missed opportunity, isn't a detour from your path, it is the path. The obstacle isn't blocking your way forward, it's showing you how to move forward. Think of a blacksmith's workshop. The hammer doesn't ruin the blade, it hones it. The furnace doesn't destroy the metal, it purifies it. Our struggles work the same way. A startup founder whose app flops learns more from that failure than from any theoretical business class. Why? Because adversity doesn't just teach lessons, it rewires instincts. When you've navigated rejection, scarcity, or public embarrassment, you develop a kind of mental callus. Future challenges don't shrink, but your capacity to handle them expands. Here's where most people get stuck. They see obstacles as interruptions to their real life, not integral parts of it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire plagued by war, betrayal, and plague, yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's not poetic optimism, it's tactical reframing. A delayed flight becomes uninterrupted reading time. A critical colleague reveals blind spots in your work. Even physical pain, as Epictetus knew from his lameness, can teach endurance if you let it. Try this today. Pick one current frustration, a financial pinch, a creative block, a health setback. Now ask, what is this obstacle here to train in me? Maybe it's patience, adaptability, or the courage to ask for help. The goal isn't to pretend it's pleasant, but to spot the hidden curriculum. Like a sculptor staring at a rough block of marble, you're learning to see the form within the friction. Because when you stop fighting the resistance, you start using it to build a version of yourself that no challenge can break. Most people listen to reply, not to understand, and that subtle shift changes everything. The Stoics saw conversation as a training ground, not just for eloquence but for presence. Epictetus, who taught in crowded Athenian streets where distractions thrived, offered a radical reminder. You own only one thing, your attention. Everything else can be taken from you. In an age where we juggle eye contact with phone screens and nod while mentally drafting responses, mindful listening isn't just courtesy. It's rebellion against the fragmentation of our focus. Picture two versions of the same conversation. One where your gaze keeps flickering to notifications while your friend shares a struggle. Your hum-s on autopilot as you mentally rehearse your own story. The other where you set your phone face down, lean slightly forward, and notice the tremor in their voice you'd otherwise miss. The first leaves both parties emptier, your friend sensing the void where empathy should be, you later regretting the connection you forfeited. The second, that's where Stoic virtue lies in the choice to offer someone the rarest modern gift, your undivided humanity. The practice goes deeper than silencing devices. Ancient Stoic circles trained in prosoch, a vigilant awareness of where attention wanders. During dialogues, they'd notice internal chatter. How do I sound? What clever point can I make? And gently return to the speaker's words like a gardener pulling weeds to let flowers thrive. Marcus Aurelius journaled about catching himself planning replies while others spoke, then course-correcting. When someone's words disturb you, it's not the words but your own resistance that unsettles you. Here's how to cultivate this today. Before your next conversation, pause for 3 breaths and silently affirm, I am here to receive, not perform. When the urge to interrupt arises, press your tongue to the roof of your mouth, a physical anchor, and count 2 heartbeats before considering if your input truly serves the exchange. Notice how often you're tempted to one-up stories. That's nothing. Wait till you hear what happened to me. Rather than deepen understanding, try this challenge before sunset. Have one conversation where you speak less than 30% of the time. Not with passive silence, but active curiosity, asking, tell me more, instead of defaulting to advice, noticing body language shifts, resisting the dopamine hit of sharing your own anecdote. You'll discover what the Stoics knew. Listening, truly listening, isn't just about gathering information. It's about saying to another soul, in this moment, you exist fully for me. And in that space, something miraculous happens. You both become more present, more alive than either could be alone. What if you woke up tomorrow to find half your possessions gone? Not stolen, not destroyed, just vanished. The Stoics didn't wait for fate to pose this question. They engineered it themselves through voluntary poverty exercises. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly slept on the floor, wore threadbare clothing, and ate nothing but stale bread for days. Why, he explained, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. This practice wasn't about self-punishment. It was a stress test for the soul, revealing whether you own your belongings or they own you. Modern life bombards us with subtle dependencies. The smartphone that feels like a limb, the air conditioning we can't imagine summer without, the daily coffee run that becomes a non-negotiable ritual. The Stoics recognized these invisible threads tying us to comfort long before behavioral scientists studied habit loops. Their solution, periodically snapping those threads on purpose. Picture a tech CEO who spends 1 weekend a month offline using a decades-old flip phone, or a college student intentionally living out of a single backpack for a week. These aren't acts of deprivation. They're rehearsals for resilience, proving to yourself that your baseline needs are far smaller than your cravings. Here's how Seneca's wealth test works today. Pick one upcoming weekend and declare it a no-spend zone. No takeout, no ride shares, no impulse purchases. Cook meals from pantry staples, walk instead of drive, rediscover forgotten books on your shelf. The goal isn't to save money, it's to expose the mental itch of I want, and observe how quickly it fades when you stop scratching it. You'll notice something fascinating. Discomfort peaks, then plateaus, then often transforms into unexpected liberation. That tightness in your chest when you resist buying the 3rd streaming subscription. That's the sound of your dependence cracking. Start smaller if needed. Choose one comfort to surrender this week: your morning latte, the snooze button, even pillows on your bed. As you do, ask Seneca's revealing question: am I afraid of poverty or of fearing poverty? Because when you voluntarily step into simplicity, you're not losing luxuries, you're gaining something far more valuable: the unshakable knowledge that you are whole without them. And in a world that constantly whispers you need more, that's a superpower money can't buy. Words are like coins, don't devalue them by spending them carelessly. The Stoics treated speech as a sacred currency, something to be measured and minted with precision. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, famously observed, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a clever quip, it was a blueprint for thoughtful communication. In a world that rewards constant noise, hot takes, rapid-fire debates, the pressure to always have an answer, the discipline of silence stands as a radical act of wisdom. Consider the last time you regretted words spoken in haste, the sharp remark that fractured a relationship, the half-formed opinion you couldn't take back. Now contrast that with a moment you chose silence, the angry email you slept on instead of sending, the gossip you didn't amplify. That gap between impulse and expression is where Stoic restraint lies. Marcus Aurelius journaled about pausing before speaking to ask 3 questions. Is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? 3 filters that could save us from countless misunderstandings and unintended wounds. The power of unspoken words often outweighs the spoken. Picture a leader who listens intently during a heated team meeting, then offers one incisive sentence that cuts to the heart of the issue. Or a parent who, instead of lecturing a rebellious teen, lets a weighted silence hang in the air, allowing space for reflection to take root. These aren't passive moments, they're strategic. Epictetus trained his students to view speech as a loaded weapon. First, decide if you're qualified to speak on this matter. If not, your silence is your credential. Here's how to practice this today. For 1 waking hour, observe a vow of intentional speech. Before saying anything, press your tongue to the roof of your mouth and count to 3. Use that pause to ask Marcus's triad: true, necessary, kind. You'll notice how often words arise from habit rather than purpose. The automatic complaint about traffic, the reflexive interruption to share your better story. Each time you resist these impulses, you're not just holding back noise, you're making room for meaning, because when you speak less, every word carries weight. And in that economy of language, even a single sentence can change a conversation. No one is a Stoic island. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about sympatheia, the profound truth that we're all threads in the same cosmic tapestry. He described the universe as one living being with a single substance and a single soul, where every action ripples outward like a stone dropped in a shared pond. This wasn't poetic fluff, it was practical philosophy. When you help a neighbor carry groceries or listen to a colleague's frustration, you're not just being kind, you're tending to the very fabric you're woven into. The Stoics saw selfishness as a kind of blindness, like a finger severing itself from the hand, then wondering why it bleeds. Think of the last time a stranger's small act shifted your day: the barista who remembered your order after a sleepless night, the commuter who made space for your bag on a crowded train. These aren't just pleasant moments, they're proof of our inherent symbiosis. Epictetus, born into slavery, knew this intimately. What harms the hive harms the bee. He didn't mean we should martyr ourselves for others, but that genuine self-interest includes collective well-being. A modern parallel: the researcher who develops a vaccine benefits as much as those who receive it. Their safety grows alongside everyone else's. Here's where Stoicism transcends individualism without dissolving into utopian idealism. Sympatheia isn't about pretending everyone is equally virtuous. It's recognizing that even the irritating coworker or the rude driver is part of the same interconnected whole. Marcus advised, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, but I cannot be angry with my kin. Not because they deserve unlimited patience, but because resentment poisons the vessel that holds it. Today's practice is disarmingly simple. Perform one act of kinship so small it feels almost insignificant. Pay for the coffee of the person behind you in line, not for praise but for the quiet reminder that their joy is yours too. Leave a book you've finished on a park bench with a note for the next reader. Even something as effortless as making full eye contact when a cashier hands you change, acknowledging their humanity in a world that often renders service workers invisible. These aren't grand gestures, they're stitches repairing the social fabric one thread at a time, because when you live as if everything is connected, you start to notice it is. Stoics weren't doormats, they were unshakable. When someone hurled an insult their way, they didn't see it as a wound to nurse or a battle to win. They saw it as a test of their own equilibrium. Epictetus, the philosopher who endured slavery and exile, put it bluntly, if someone speaks badly of you, that's their opinion. Does their opinion make you worse? Only if you agree with it. That's the Stoic secret to handling insults, not by absorbing them, but by letting them pass through you like wind through a screen, leaving no mark behind. Picture a modern celebrity at a press conference when a reporter lobs a snide question. Instead of firing back with equal venom or crumbling under the jab, they might smile and say, "Interesting perspective, let's move on." That's not weakness, it's tactical detachment. The insult only gains power if you grant it a home in your mind. Marcus Aurelius, who faced constant political sabotage, wrote in his private journal, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." Not by out-shouting them, but by refusing to let their noise dictate your inner quiet. This practice isn't about suppressing anger, it's about redirecting energy. When you refuse to engage in a verbal sparring match, you're not conceding, you're conserving your focus for what truly matters. Think of a martial artist who sidesteps a wild punch instead of meeting force with force. The attacker expends energy while the practitioner remains poised, ready for meaningful action. Seneca described this beautifully. A man's as miserable as he thinks he is, and as great. The moment you stop defining yourself by others' slights, you reclaim the pen that writes your self-worth. Here's how to train this muscle today. Pick one minor provocation you'd normally react to, a snippy comment online, a driver's rude gesture, and consciously let it go. Not with bottled-up resentment, but with genuine indifference. Imagine the insult as a package delivered to your doorstep. You wouldn't bring a bomb inside. Why would you internalize words that only explode if you unwrap them? The goal isn't to never feel stung. It's to shorten the sting's lifespan from hours to seconds. Try this reframe. Next time someone tries to bait you, silently thank them for the free resilience training. Every withheld reaction is a deposit in your emotional bank account, compounding interest in self-mastery. Because when you stop playing other people's games, you start writing your own rules, and no insult can rewrite them for you. You might have fewer days left than you think, not as morbid threat, but as liberating clarity. Seneca opened his piercing essay on the shortness of life with a paradox. Life is long if you know how to use it. He wasn't talking about adding years to your calendar, but depth to your moments. The average person lives around 30,000 days. Subtract time spent sleeping, working, and tending to necessities, and what remains is startlingly finite. Yet we fritter away hours like loose change, scrolling past the same headlines, replaying old grievances, or waiting for some mythical later to begin living. Seneca watched wealthy Romans do this centuries ago, writing, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." Consider two versions of your week ahead. One where you drift through routines on autopilot, letting notifications and trivial tasks dictate your attention. The other where you prune just two time wasters, say, the 30-minute social media scroll before bed or the habitual checking of emails during creative hours. That reclaimed hour daily becomes 7 extra weeks of focused living per year. The Stoics didn't measure life in sunrises, but in sunrises fully seen moments where presence eclipsed distraction. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do every act of your life as though it were the last," he wasn't advocating for melodrama. He was prescribing a filter for what deserves your irreplaceable time. Modern research confirms Seneca's insight. The busier people are, the more they overestimate future free time. We tell ourselves, "I'll travel after this project," or "I'll reconnect with friends next month," as if time owes us a debt it has no intention of paying. The antidote: treat hours like currency with an expiration date. A CEO client of mine keeps an hourglass on his desk, not as decor, but as a visceral reminder that some sands will never flow again. Another writes Memento Mori in her planner's margins before scheduling anything, asking, "Would I regret spending my last day this way?" Your challenge starts small. Tonight, audit 1 hour of your day, the one that currently evaporates into nothingness. Maybe it's the after-dinner YouTube rabbit hole or the compulsive news refreshers. Don't vow to eliminate it entirely. Simply observe it with Seneca's detached curiosity. Is this how I'd spend an hour if I knew it was my last? The goal isn't guilt but awakening, because when you stop pretending time is infinite, you start noticing the extraordinary hidden in ordinary moments, the way light slants through your window at golden hour, the unplanned laughter with a colleague, the quiet joy of a task done well. And in that awareness, something miraculous happens. Your days stop shrinking and start expanding, not because they've grown longer, but because you finally learned how to live them. Indifference isn't cold, it's free. The Stoics didn't preach emotional detachment to numb us to life's richness, but to liberate us from the tyranny of craving. They called this radical concept preferred indifference, things we might enjoy or pursue, but that we refuse to let dictate our peace. Epictetus, who owned little more than a wooden cup until he saw a child drink from cupped hands and threw even that away, put it plainly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Notice the precision here. He didn't say possessions are evil, just that they're irrelevant to true wealth. That's the Stoic art of indifference, holding things lightly enough that their absence can't unravel you. Picture a famous actor at the peak of their career suddenly walking away from Hollywood, not in scandal or burnout, but with quiet clarity that the accolades no longer define them. That's indifference in action, recognizing that fame, like any external, is neither good nor bad. It's how you relate to it that matters. The Stoics would applaud not the rejection of success, but the refusal to be enslaved by it. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire, journaled daily reminders that purple robes and cheers were just dyed wool and echoing air. He didn't disdain his station, he simply refused to let it distort his self-worth. This practice isn't about erasing desire, it's about contextualizing it. Imagine you're offered a promotion with a hefty salary bump. The Stoic approach: celebrate the opportunity but interrogate your motives. Will this role amplify my values or just my status? If it vanished tomorrow, would I still feel whole? Preferred indifference are like dessert, pleasurable to savor, but not the foundation of a nourishing life. Epictetus captured this with his famous dichotomy: some things are up to us, others are not. Your job up to others, your integrity always yours. Here's how to cultivate this today. Grab a notebook and list 3 things you currently overvalue, not material items alone, but intangible externals too. Maybe it's your social media follower count, your title at work, or even your reputation as the reliable one. Next to each, write, if this were gone tomorrow, what would remain? The goal isn't to discard these things, but to expose the hidden hooks they've sunk into your happiness. Like a traveler packing lighter after realizing extra bags only slow them down, you'll start noticing how much energy you've wasted guarding treasures that were never yours to keep. Try this reframe for 1 week. Treat a cherished indifferent as if it's already lost. If you cling to productivity praise, intentionally leave a task unfinished and observe the sky not falling. If social validation matters too much, skip posting a well-crafted photo and savor the anonymity. You're not practicing neglect, you're rehearsing freedom. Because when you stop fearing loss, you stop chasing illusions, and in that space, something extraordinary happens. You begin to possess the world by no longer being possessed by it. Even Stoics admitted the sage is rare, that mythical being who navigates every storm with flawless reason, never stumbling, never wavering. But here's the liberating truth: Stoicism wasn't designed for saints. It was crafted for strugglers, for the perpetually imperfect people like Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in his private journal, "I am still far from being the kind of person I want to be, but at least I'm no longer the kind I once was." That's the heartbeat of this practice, not achieving some unattainable ideal, but honoring the dignity of the attempt. Think of it like learning the violin. No one expects perfect pitch on day 1. The screeches and missed notes aren't failures, they're proof you're playing. The Stoics viewed moral progress the same way. When you lose your temper less often than last year, when you catch yourself mid-complaint and pivot to gratitude, when you own a mistake instead of deflecting it, these aren't small victories. They're the incremental mastery of being human. Epictetus, who taught students for decades, compared it to Olympic training. Do you think you can eat like a normal person and still become a champion? No, but neither can you expect to act like a sage without daily practice. Consider the executive who snaps at her team during a high-pressure meeting. The unstoic response, self-flagellation, "I'm terrible at this." The sage in training, she pauses, recognizes the lapse, and later gathers her team to say, "I let stress dictate my tone earlier. That wasn't fair. Here's how we'll adjust moving forward." That's progress, not perfection. It's not the absence of stumbles that defines wisdom, but the willingness to learn from each scuffed knee. Here's your challenge today. Pick one area where you're aware of your growth edge. Maybe it's patience with your kids, resisting gossip, or handling criticism. Don't aim to eliminate the struggle. Aim to notice it with kinder eyes. When you feel that familiar heat rise, whisper Marcus's reminder. The obstacle to the action becomes the action. That moment of awareness, that's the sage mind taking root. Because wisdom isn't a destination you reach, it's the posture you carry on the journey. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is acknowledge how far you've come, even as you keep walking. 24 practices might sound like a lot, but here's the beautiful paradox of Stoicism. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about the quiet, cumulative power of small, daily choices like drops of water, slowly carving canyons into stone. Each of these tools, from morning intention setting to evening reflection, from voluntary discomfort to mindful listening, isn't meant to be another item on your to-do list. They're threads in a single tapestry, woven together to create something far greater than the sum of its parts. A life where mindfulness isn't something you do, but who you are. Think of it like building physical strength. You wouldn't walk into a gym and attempt to lift the heaviest weight on day one. You'd start with what you can manage, focusing on form over force, consistency over intensity. Stoic mindfulness works the same way. The goal isn't perfection, it's showing up day after day with a willingness to engage. Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about daily discipline, put it perfectly. No great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. That's the heart of sustainability, recognizing that transformation happens in seasons, not sprints. Maybe today you'll pause for 3 breaths before reacting to a frustrating email. Tomorrow, you might journal about one moment where impatience crept in. Over weeks and months, these micro shifts compound into something extraordinary, not because you've mastered Stoicism, but because Stoicism has gently reshaped you. So here's your invitation. Don't try to adopt all 24 practices at once. Pick one, just one, that resonates most, and live with it for the next 7 days. Maybe it's the morning question, what virtue could anchor me today? Or the evening reflection, where did I stumble and where did I grow? Share in the comments which practice you're choosing, not as a promise but as a pact with yourself. Because the journey to a more mindful life begins with a single step, not a leap, and that step, it's already yours.